parts of the book of Proverbs. I'll be giving those out after we finish with chapter 9 to take a few more weeks and get us to the proper place where we need to be by about March. But what we have here in this part is merely a kind of an introduction of what wisdom is, how important that it is, where it comes from, what it does, how it acts in our life, and so forth. And we're ready to start with the one beyond this. We talked about the ant and the sluggard being told to go to the ant, learn industriousness, learn that kind of work ethic that was there, as we noted. Then we're ready to start with chapter 6 and verse 12, 15. It says, a worthless person, a wicked man, walks in a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes and shuffles his feet and points with his finger. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. When you look at that statement about a worthless person or a wicked man, one that speaks evil, as it's noted, then what you see next is a description of him. Look at verse 13 and what it says, that he winks with his eyes, shuffles his feet, and points his fingers. How does that happen? What kind of a picture is that giving you? Does that sound like anything or look like anything that you think of someone who's wicked doing? Calls attention away from the actions that are there. Shuffles his feet. You know how sometimes people shuffle their feet. They're looking around down there, and then they're kind of pointing over to something else. What is that all doing? That's all trying to get a kind of a distraction from the evil that is happening, to put our concentration on something else. And that's a good description when you see that's just exactly how it is that evil acts. The perversity, in other words, the problems that he has of going into evil, do they start from his hands or his feet or something else there? They start from his heart, from within. So he's diverting attention elsewhere because that which is of the evil that's there is rooted deeply within him. It's a part of him, is the concept. He devises evil continually. It's not as if this is something that's just a very rare thing with him. The evil person gets to be one who's involved in that in a continuous sense. We noted last time, saying what? The fact is that sometimes people talk about, well, what happens with just this one sin? Well, one sin is dangerous. It causes spiritual death, no doubt. But it's a distraction from the reality of how sin usually takes hold of someone. It's not one. It's a number of them, that they're piled up together. That when they commit one sin, there's another to cover it, another to go this direction, and another to try to go and cover up that. And as a result of that, it ends up in a mass of action that's after that idea of sin. It's very rare that you see someone with just one sin all by itself out there. It's going to be something compounded. He talks about he devises evil continually and he sows discord. Why sowing the discord? This really gets the same thing you talked about with the physical actions, the pointing elsewhere. Why will someone who sows discord themselves with regard to their own evil, why will they sow discord over somewhere else or between other people?
To get the emphasis off of the...
All right, same thing. To get that emphasis off of their own sin, they're going to start it over there. And that's what you see many times. This is a tactic that when you look at it in warfare among nations, well, what do? They try to do something over here to make it look like this one did something bad to them, so that one will hate them, just like they do, and they get that kind of subterfuge going. Well, that's exactly what's talked about here with evil as well. It is that kind of a thing that is interrelated. He says that's why, when you look at it, the calamity shall come upon them suddenly. And then repeats this. This is in the Hebrew as well, that you have a repetition of this same word. Suddenly, he shall be broken without remedy. The emphasis being on it is not something that delays. That evil, when it's allowed to dwell in our life or allowed to take over our life, will do something of bringing that calamity with a quickness about. It'll bring about the disaster within one's life when it's allowed to exist there. Anybody else got anything on that? Anybody want to bring up? Go ahead, Larry.
I was going to say you can only cause so many diversions, and after that you got to face the privilege.
Okay. All right. Let's look at these, starting with verse 16. This is probably one of the more, I guess you would say, well-known passages in the book of in the book of Proverbs. We're not in Hebrews tonight, but in the book of Proverbs, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among his brethren. When you have that statement, 6 things the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination to him. Why that statement 6, then 7? Did he forget? He's thinking about 6 and say, oh, I forgot. There's another one. No, that's not it. What he says is by inspiration. We don't tend to do things in that way. What tended to happen in Hebrew literature, however, was the point. When you have the number 7, that's usually that number that is of perfection or completeness in the sense of being brought together in that way. And when you say 6, no, 7, here's that short of a complete evil, but here's the full of it. It's pointing out that there's something there being given emphasis. And that's the idea of why this is done in this way. It isn't the writer forgetting he was going to talk about 7, saying 6. No, I meant to say 7. That's not it. It's just an emphasis of these things. Now, look at what he talks about. In this emphasis, he says, what's the first one? A proud look. What does that mean? A proud look. Okay, haughty and arrogance, it's there. Can you see that on the face of one? I notice a lot of this when you have a lot of politicians. They're always bragging on themselves and acting like they're the ones who are the greatest of all. And you see that look, that disdain toward everybody else, that they're lower than I am or something like that. You also see it with people generally in kind of a way that is out there. It's something that's sometimes attached to the idea of wealth or of degree or something like that, class, with regard to those societies that have that. A downward look, a kind of a sense that this person's lesser than I am. And as a result of that, that kind of haughtiness. Why is that such a problem? Go ahead.
Yeah, a good example in the Bible, I think, is probably Nebuchadnezzar. He was walking through the garden.
All right.
And marking out all the great things he had done, how great he was.
And God reminded him what? I'm the one who gave you this. You're going to go out there and wander with the cows. And you'll eat the grass like they do for a while until you learn that the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men. In other words, that this is from God, not from you. What do you notice about pride? What does it do? Now, why is it so dangerous that it's mentioned many times?
It's the complete,
Do what?
it's the complete opposite of what God teaches. Denying self,
Okay.
serving others, serving God.
All right. before we can serve God the way that we ought, what kind of mind do we have to have towards God? You fear God?
Fear of the Lord.
Okay.
Getting the knowledge.
All right. There is that fear of God, that recognition of His greatness. In other words, there's a reverence. You can't have reverence for God and have that haughty kind of a proud look. To think that you're the one that is the source of all good, or the source of some, I guess you would say, revelation or whatever else. When one recognizes that I'm nothing and God is everything, that's where he starts to recognize the degree to which he follows after God, to have Him first. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, that statement, as the writer begins there, as Moses is pointing out to the people, is the statement of His nature. The Lord our God is one. That doesn't mean that He's one in person. There is one divine nature, but that's not what it's talking about either. The idea of God being one there is He's solitary. There is no one else like Him. There's no one that can be compared to that. That's why when Paul goes over in the book of Acts chapter 17, to deal with those at Athens, what's the point? The point is, you've got all this panoply of gods. That's not how God is. God is unique in that He has all power. He's the source of life. All of those kind of things. The uniqueness of God, the fact that He is in a place of otherness, sometimes people put it as. In other words, He's totally different and above grandeur than anything of man. That's why Isaiah talks about that very thing. As the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways than your ways, my thoughts than your thoughts. The nature of God is His greatness. Now, do you recognize when you don't have that idea of the greatness of God, the submission of self, then what's going to take the place of that? The exaltation of self, and what? The subjugation of God. Who gives you a good illustration of that in the New Testament during the Gospels? You remember the Pharisee and the publican going up to the temple to pray? What did the Pharisee pray like?
Thank God for not being like other people.
All right. And then he started telling God how good He was. I give tithes of all that I get. I do this, that, and the other. The Pharisee, it says, not even lifting his eyes up to God, smote upon his breast. In other words, he prostrated himself, face down before God. And what did he say? God, be thou merciful to me, a sinner. That's a recognition. Here was a man who was respected by the world many times, this Pharisee, as one who was righteous. That's the way he looked at it. He was one who was their very definition of righteous, as he thought of it. And he was esteemed. He was looking for that esteem from others. But what was that other man looking for? Mercy from God. That idea of God's grace being brought upon him. He recognized his own value was infinitesimal in comparison to God. And therefore, he prostrates himself and recognizes the grandeur, the greatness of God. How many times do you see that being done in the Bible, Old Testament and New? Where can you give me a case of that? People who recognize truly, who depend upon God's greatness and their own humility in the face of that. All right, you have Job there in his misery. Go ahead, Chuck.
Wasn't Moses reported to be the most humble?
Most meek of man on the face of the earth. Do what? All right, David recognized his own smallness, especially in the penitential Psalms, you see the idea that he sees himself utterly as void, that he has done that which is evil, and he searches for the grace of God, the mercy of God. Why? Because that's the only way he could be saved. That was the only way he could be one forgiven of those sins.
Jonah's prayer to God and God as well.
Okay, Jonah's prayer. That was one of the things I was wanting to come up, was the statement of prayer. When you look at prayer throughout the Bible, and especially you see more of the prayers in a fuller way of people praying and telling what they said in a more completed fashion in the Old Testament than you do the New. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice if we look at prayer and we go to the New Testament and we don't go back there and see some of those things. Daniel's prayer is one from Daniel 9, I believe. He talks about the greatness of God as he starts out. He's praying for them to be forgiven, but brought back into the land when he recognizes that it's that 70 years that God had said through Jeremiah. In other cases, you have that as well, of prayers that put God up on the pedestal, so to speak, as being the Almighty, the Creator, the Sustainer. All of these things, recognizing His greatness and our own smallness. Go ahead.
Was it Hezekiah that prayed for more years on this earth?
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one that showed the other king all his possessions and then lost them?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and then
Showed the people of Babylon all the things that were there, and they came in and stole them at the time they take over Judah. All right. When you look at pride, what I want us to understand is pride isn't just a kind of a one by itself sin. How many sins can you think of that pride is not possibly involved with? At its very base, what do we say when we decide to sin willfully? What I want is more important than what God says. And so when you look at it, that pride is involved at the very base of almost every sin that's there, because it puts my will over God's will. That certainly is an elevation of self. But then in the use of others in a way that's wrong. In a recognition of, or in an idea of stealing from another person. Depriving them so I can have something. In each one of those cases, what have I made my estimation of self versus them? It's something that first, I need to have these things. This is more important than that person. So you've elevated self. And I think is why you have this statement of a proud look there in the very beginning of this. A lying tongue. What do you find about lying in the Bible as to why it is so heinous in God's sight? Okay, it's against His nature. Where do we find that? Hebrews talks about that He took an oath as well as a promise that He would do this, so that there are two things in which it is what? Impossible for God to lie. And then Titus talks about God who cannot lie, says this. So you have these kind of statements that it's against the very nature of God. God is a God of truth. By His very nature, it's the antithesis of any kind of falsehood or deceit. And so when we commit that which is of a lie, or we deceive in some way, whose nature are we taking hold of? Satan's. Why? He was the father of the lies, as Jesus talks about it. And so you're seeing something that's the very opposite of God in nature. Hands that shed innocent blood. What's innocent blood? Go ahead.
People that don't deserve to die.
Okay. So that means somebody must deserve to die, right? How has someone seen their blood be upon them? They talk about, in other words, here was action of taking a life, and it belonged not in the sense of taking that which was guilty, but they've done that which is taking a life which did not need to be taken, which was not judged guilty. You always have that done when there is testimony that is given and it's proven, whether it's by God or by a plurality of witnesses or various other things. You have to first prove that that one is guilty of taking life. And then after it's proven guilty of taking life, then their life needs to be taken. Why? Because God had said that. Genesis 9, when he allowed the eating of meat, he said that you cannot eat the blood. Why? Because that was a principle. The blood is the life. Therefore, when you take that blood and you take that yourself, you make that your own, then what happens? You've done what God says is what belongs to him, not to any man. So what happens when we look at the idea of someone saying, well, you know, I can go ahead and bring about the death of this baby within a mother as long as it isn't out in the world, then, you know, it's just a part of her body and you can kill it, no problem. Why does that not work?
I think it was David that said when he was but substance, God knew him in his mother's womb, God knew him. To me, that tells me that baby, that substance is known by God from the time it was conceived.
You have that in the case there, and also in the case very clearly of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, that being stated, that within the womb, that they were known for who they were. There's a statement that is made, both Old Testament and New, that talks about the mother conceiving and bearing a son. You see that several times, both in the New Testament and in the Old. Think about that for a moment. What was conceived was what? A son. Wasn't a mass of flesh. The thing conceived was a son. Now, how can we say that's part of the mother, who is a female, not a male, but now this was conceived a son and bore a son? In other words, it is of the same substance of life as what you had conceived or born. Here's another one. When you look at the child within the womb of Mary and Elizabeth, it's called that which was seen as a child. It's either that which is a son or a daughter. But the point that is made, that word that is used there for a child, brephos, is used for a child all the way up to the time it stops crawling and starts to walk. That's what a brephos is. And yet John and Jesus both within the womb are called a brephos. In other words, there isn't any difference between the child within the womb and the child out of the womb as far as the wording that is used. They are exactly the same. Go ahead.
The NIV version actually says baby there.
Yes. And you'll have those kind of statements that are made. From a biblical sense, you can't possibly justify abortion as the rightful taking of life. It's the taking of innocent life, innocent blood that's shed. And as a result of that, we need to look and recognize how absolutely God hates that. When that was there, the taking of life, whether it was a young child or whether it was somebody a little bit older, a widow, whatever, where they killed one when there was no guilt of that person involved, then what does God think about it? God hates that. That was one of the reasons Israel was taken off of the land, was because of their shedding of innocent blood. I saw, was it you, James? Okay.
Of course, I always think about abortion when I see this, but looking deeper into it, there were laws in place under God's law back then where you had a right to stone someone if they did something wrong or whatever. But he's already talked about a proud and lying person. So this is someone who's willing to kill somebody and then tell everybody, well, this is what he did.
Yeah.
So this is that innocent blood. I think that this particular passage is pointing to then. But there were some where they would have a baby living on the roadside. So you paint that as the same thing.
That's right. Or the worship of Molech and all of that, the evil of that. Doesn't matter how you take innocent life, unless there was a guilt and that life needed to be taken because there was blood guiltiness, then it's the taking of innocent blood. And again, you look at the reasons God says he's taken Israel off the land, and that's one that's mentioned in every single case of why God says he's taking them away from there. A heart that devises wicked plans. The literal sense of this is a heart, in other words, that will. We're not talking about the blood pump. We're talking about that will of man that works toward a plan, gets out a purpose, gets out a way of doing the thing that's evil. When I am tempted, I'm not guilty of sin at that time. James 1, I think, is very clear with regard to that. The temptation in itself is not sin. Now, what happens when I have this temptation and now I move that to say, okay, I really want to do that. And then I go beyond that to say, here's how I'm going to do it if I have the chance. You have something pictured of that in Matthew chapter 5. When a man has committed adultery already in his heart, that's a guilt of sin that's involved there. One might say, well, he hasn't committed the action yet. No, he hadn't committed that sin, but he has committed a sin. He has committed that in his heart, that devising a wicked plan. If he just lacks the opportunity, he isn't free and clear because of that. If he devises that sin, says, if I get a chance, I'm going to do this. That isn't in itself the idea of sin that is taking place within the heart. That planning out of the evil. Go ahead, Jason.
Even our secular laws are more harsh in crimes that are committed with a level of premeditation, because it shows that person's willingness to go outside the norm,
Sure.
to cause harm, commit sin, and it is the same God values when
Yeah.
we willfully make plans.
That's right. All right, go ahead. Chuck.
I have a note here in my Bible, I'm not sure where I got it, but it seems to me that these 4 verses are almost messianic. That these are the sins that were central to the murder, the illegal trial and murder of Christ.
That's true. There is a very clear commonality between that. All right? You have feet that are swift in running to evil. It's not just that people go and do evil, but their feet are swift in running to that. Suggesting what? Okay. There's a desire, a longing for sin that wants to do it now. When you see someone committing a sin, that's out there, and they make that purpose in their heart. I'm trying to stay away from this. I'm fighting this, and they ask your prayers or your help. What does that tell you? They're having a weakness with regard to sin, no doubt about that. But what does it tell you when they're asking for your prayers? I'm trying to stay away. Almost called on you, and it was the wrong one raising hand. Anybody have something?
But they want to do right.
Okay.
They're striving to do right. They're not trying to do wrong.
Okay. How does that differ from this guy?
How they view it.
All right. It's very opposite. He's trying to get at that as quick as he can. In other words, he sees it as advantageous to sin, and he's swift in moving to that point. A false witness who speaks lies. What's that a lot like of the previous one? All right, a lying tongue, how's it different?
He's defaming people. He's causing people to get punishment or some other judgment based on them. Instead of lying to look good in someone's eyes, he's lying to hurt somebody.
All right. Statement from the beginning of the law, when you look in Exodus, and then the restatement of the law, Deuteronomy chapter 5 and onward. What you notice is that there is a point with regard to giving oaths, that when you give your testimony, you don't defer that from the truth in any way, not to the right or the left. You don't do it to help out the poor man. You don't do it to help out the rich man. The idea is it's something where you give a testimony that is exactly what the truth is. We have the statements in court of law that we promise we're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, as far as God is concerned, that's the only way you can tell the truth. If it's going to be the truth, it has to be not a part of that and implying something that isn't so. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, nothing of a mixture in there of any kind of deception at all. And so here the point is with God's statement is when one is going to bear a false witness or false testimony that is there. How do I know it's a false testimony? Because it's that which isn't true. It's a lie. And you don't do that. Courts of law depend on what? On truth. That's why those kind of statements to swear someone in or whatever are demanded. Because if you don't have the truth, you have no justice that's possible. And that's the idea with God, that is going to be something that's necessary. And one who sows discord among brethren. Sometimes that isn't viewed as so bad. But that's here with everything else that is, we might see as big sins. There are no big ones and little ones as far as God is concerned. All of them are sin. But when you look at this, one that sows discord among brethren, causing division. Why is that? Go ahead.
It's not bad until you're the one that feels it.
Okay.
And you're the one that happens to.
Okay.
That is really bad.
Then you have that kind of a point that you recognize those things. The idea of sowing discord is that here you have that which is a desire for there to be a unity as far as God's concerned. You remember in John 17 when Jesus is making that prayer the night before he's crucified? His prayer was that, Father, that they might be one, even as we are one. That desire for unity that is found, that unity of truth, is one where one longs for that. You think about Jesus about to die on the cross, and yet for the entirety of John 17, that prayer has to do with his brethren, so that they might have that unity to exist, that unity in truth, to where that truth was taken through the world. It might have the effect. What happens when there's discord that's present among God's people? Do you usually find that as a time of a great deal of evangelism? Why not?
You're playing damage control
Okay.
amongst the brethren. And typically one that is sowing discord is pretty much guilty of all the others except maybe shedding innocent blood. You know, and maybe not a proud look, but is typically a somewhat lying tongue, and they're certainly devising evil plans and running to evil, and usually speaking somewhat lies, you know, twisting things around. But, I mean, that's the worst of the seven, pretty much, if you really want to put a value on any of them.
It's an internal one. We see most of the rest that would take place in a lot of ways out in the world, we would think. But here you've got one that is obviously internal. And it's causing that friction or division to exist where we're trying to further the cause of God. First, Jason and then James.
It's so bad that Titus 3:10 says after two warnings, you don't have anything to do with them.
That's right.
Completely cut them out, cut them off, don't have anything to do with them.
The first and second admonition, refuse those who are that way. James, you had something.
Well, if one is allowed to sow this discord, I mean, it allows, it doesn't have anything to stop any kind of sin. It doesn't matter. It just allows so much confusion, so much hardship on everybody. It won't stop. In James, chapter 3, he says in verse 14, but you have bitter envy seeking in your hearts. Do not boast and lie against the truth. Wisdom does not descend above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. Then in 16, where there is envy and self-seeking exists, confusion and every evil thing is there. I mean, it allows everything to come in that discord.
Correct. We had late.
I was going to say that in the Bible, Diotrephes seems to be a person kind of like this spirit. He wouldn't receive them and was
Love to have the preeminence is the statement. Yeah. When you think about this, the sowing of the discord there, think about the mindset that is here. The idea of that sowing discord, the desire is what?
Create trouble to tear people apart.
Okay, I want to tear it apart. I want to try to get this to be divided in nature. The attitude of a Christian, whether they are involved in trying to correct a wrong or in other times, whatever it might be, what is their desire? To see them to come together, to work for that togetherness, that peace that it could exist. There is no good that takes place by division. I'm aware of the fact that we must see those who have gone away from us, as Paul put it. I agree with that. There's no doubt about that. But what we see is some soul is lost. The only way where that is best for everyone is what? There's a reconciliation. Sometimes there get to be rifts, and the idea is, well, once there's that rift, we'll continue in that rift. I just don't like this person from now on. That's not the way it ought to be. The way it ought to be is we deal with that, we come back together, and we truly have no problem with one another at that point. Why? Because we're working together in the cause of Christ. That's the ideal for us to have, is not a continuing kind of a divisive spirit or a divided attitude. It's to bring them back together. Anytime that you see the New Testament talking about that, you notice that point, that there is not rendering evil for evil, but what instead? Good. Because that's the way you can turn that around and work it to the good of God's kingdom. When you look and see what we have the responsibility of taking that gospel to the world. In every generation, we have that same responsibility. How are we going to be able to do that if we're involved in a war with one another? That ain't going to be possible. What we need to do is we need to do the battles that are necessary for truth. We need to get over them, get on with that truth, evangelism, and other things that we ought to do for the good of God's cause. Let those other things go. Once they're done, they're done. And let's get back to that kind of work that's there. This is someone who'd rather have that fighting. I think I said this before, but I just, again, the best, no, I didn't mean that. Not the best, because it was horrible. But the most, I guess you would say, graphic illustration I ever saw of that. I was having lunch with some preachers, and one of them talked about, well, you give me a congregation, I go in there where there's 250, and I'll have them down to 45 in 6 months. They'll be fighting like it. And he seemed to be proud of that, and I said, well, it take about 3 years and build them up to 500. If it's something where that's our desire, is just to let's divide, and that somehow speaks of how we're better off if we can get a kind of subtraction of less and less. That's not the idea. We're trying to reach the whole world with the gospel. And the more we can have working together in that, the better off it is. That sowing discord and the idea of those who are working together in the cause of Christ, those are two opposite things. And you look at God, and the kind of attitude that was manifested by God coming in the flesh in Jesus Christ, and you see it in John 17. It's the very opposite of this one sowing discord. Anybody else got? Go ahead.
You know, I typically read that and I think kind of pitting one person against another, or, you know, but it can also be sowing false ideologies,
Yes.
you know, and false ideas, and bringing doubt
Right.
on areas, you know, and then you start separating people with those things like that. It doesn't have to particularly be this person against that person or this group against that group. It can be done with ideologies too.
I was at a congregation at one time, and the congregation had been peaceful, working, had a history of that. Guy came in there who believed they were on divorce and remarriage, didn't know it, didn't tell the elders anything about that having been happening before, but it had been, and he had been marked before even as a result of it. And what he did was he started with the younger couples and teaching them. And then he saw that some of these older ones were having marital problems, and he went to them and talked about this error. That congregation divided. It never has been the same, and it went after one after another errors that I've seen. It's pathetic. That's kind of thing that does take place, and that's the error, and that's what it does. Go ahead, Eric.
Matthew chapter 5:9 puts it plainly, right? The children of God are peacemakers.
That's right.
And the idea, you know, Paul even states it in Ephesians chapter 6, the gospel of peace.
That's
if
right.
you want peace in life, sleep well at night, not have worries and concerns, then you go to the one that gives peace.
That's right.
And that is our God and our Savior, Jesus Christ, who gives us peace and wants us to be peaceful people.
That's right. As has been pointed out rightly, Paul, over in the 12th chapter of Romans, points out, as much as in you is, be at peace with all men. There's some people who won't have it. But as much as in you is, in other words, you do everything you can to try to bring about this peace. And that's the attitude that we ought to have. Go ahead.
Is this kind of what it's talking about also in 1 Corinthians 6? Not going to law against one another? Just, I mean, if it's not a big deal.
That's involved in it. Suffer the wrong yourself. Yeah, that's right. The peace of the people is more important than your own particular benefit. All right, go ahead, David.
But I think too often we pass this off, we don't take this very serious. I guess a discord within my family, we call it barbecue the preacher on the way home.
Yeah.
Because we think about the relationship between me and the preacher. So I talk bad about it. Well, I just don't like the preacher. That is discord among brethren. That is not unity in the Lord's church.
Right.
And whether it's the preacher, whether it's the elder, whether it's another member, that's a sin.
Yeah.
That separates us from God. And God says, you're an enemy of me. We understand sin makes us an enemy of God. I can also sow discord with my body language.
That's right.
There's so many ways that I can sow discord with a loud grunt or a huff or throwing my hands up or stomping out in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
And we need to understand the severity of this. This is a sin. This is just the same as murder. This is just the same as homosexuality. This is the same as lying. This is not something we just go, oh, that's old Dave, he's just got a bad temper. No, that's old Dave in sin. And he's lost. And that's we just can't write this off. We do write it off too much.
All right. Good comments, everybody. We're out of time. So, Doug, I've got you as being the one to dismiss us, so we'll be dismissed in prayer, and then we can go.